Welcome, everybody, to CSM Mastermind. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and the Success Coaching Training Program. We're back for our monthly live webcast today, talking about desired outcomes. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training, now with just shy of 20,000 students from nearly 100 countries. Our training programs are available in a variety of formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps. We're accepting registrations for all of our virtual instructor-led programs through the end of the year. We still have a few seats left in for our level 2 boot camp, which I will be hosting right after the Thanksgiving week, and change management for customer success. That'll be happening in November and December. And our outcome-based selling bootcamp in December. Ashley's going to drop some coupon codes that you can use for being part of our session today, and also some links where you can find out more. We'll also be posting our 2023 training schedule on our website sometime in the next few weeks. Actually, I believe our spring coaching programs that are being offered through the University of San Francisco are already posted, and our 2023 boot camps are going to be posted next week. So you can find out more about all of our programs and our offerings at successcoaching.co. All right, enough of that. For those of you who haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic that is relevant to customer success, regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, or the sizes of the customers that you deal with. We aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. The schedule for upcoming events can also be found at successcoaching.co. Click on that events tab at the top of the page to find out more and to sign up. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is recorded and we'll be posting a replay along with a transcription on our website early next week. So if you have to log out early, we do go till 15 minutes past the hour. Rest assured that the recording as well as a transcript will be available in about a week. We will be taking questions later on during the webinar, so please don't be shy and use that Q&A button that's found at the bottom of your screen to ask or upvote a question. We are also broadcasting on LinkedIn Live. So for those of you watching on LinkedIn Live, we have somebody that's monitoring that feed. So if you have questions, and you're watching on LinkedIn Live, please post them and they'll be relayed to us. Also, please keep all commentary and chat. So please keep all commentary to the chat window. So questions, Q&A, commentary to the chat window. If a question gets dropped in chat, Ashley will kindly remind you to put it into the Q&A window. That's how we keep things organized. There's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. In this series, we focus on practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those that are practicing customer success on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite 3 panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. Excuse me, getting all choked up. About to introduce my guests.
Very emotional, Andrew.
These guests choke me up.
Take a moment.
So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are and what they do. And let's get started, as usual, in alphabetical order with Josh.
Which is entirely weird for me because my last name being Zamora, I'm always used to being last. So this is a unique experience for me. But yeah, Josh Zamora, I'm based in San Diego, currently Director of Customer Success at Site Improve, a small accessibility and web analytics company. I say small, especially considering that I came from ServiceNow, where Patrice is, and Patrice and I know each other from a while now. But yeah, it's been a change up. Been here for 6 weeks now at this point in time, 8 weeks, and it's been a trip. Enjoying it.
Awesome. And Josh, you and I go back now many years.
We do.
You've been on the webinar. You've been on my webcast. And this, you were a last minute panelist, and I appreciate the flexibility. We all appreciate the flexibility and the time.
Always happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Christy, you're up.
All right. My name is Christy Falteruso. I'm currently the Chief Customer Officer at Client Success. We are a customer success management solution. So we like to say that we manage everything from new to renew, helping our customers manage their entire customer lifecycle. I've been at Client Success now for just short of 2 years, which feels like I've been here forever and I just started. So very odd. But I manage our entire post-initial sales organization. So I've got customer success, support, and services all under my remit. Also get to lean in very heavily into marketing and product strategy. So having a lot of fun. Excited to be here, Andrew.
Always excited to have you, Christy. One of my favorite people. I've got 3 of my favorite people on this
You say
webinar.
that to all your guests, Andrew. I'm not buying
I do not.
Not lip service. No.
No. But I can't believe you've been there for nearly 2 years.
Isn't
That's
that
awesome.
Crazy.
Yeah,
I
that is.
watched you before I joined. So it's
Time flies.
That's awesome. And we of course are huge fans of the team over there. And once again, we don't make specific, recommendations of software. We definitely think everybody should check out all of the vendors out there, but we just like the client success team is just good people, really good people. And we have enjoyed a strong partnership over the years. And we're the platinum sponsor for the CS 100, which is one of our favorite events that we spend our trade show budget on. And we'll be doing it again next year. So thanks, Christy. And finally, Patrice.
Hi, everybody. Patrice Sawchuk. I'm Director of Customer Success at ServiceNow. Those of you not familiar with ServiceNow, we're a workflow software, and our mission is to simplify the way you work. I've been with ServiceNow for going on 3 years now, but I've spent the majority of my career in tech, in success. Like most of us, I say I've been in success before we even called it success. Been client facing, helping customers to be successful for the majority of my career, and super excited to be here today with these awesome panelists.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrice. And once again, we've got a great relationship, a great partnership with the team at ServiceNow as well. And we'll always appreciate your support and your involvement in this. Once again, we appreciate the time that all of you are putting in today, as well as the time that we put in at the beginning of the week for our prep call. So now let's get to the topic at hand. The term customer outcomes can mean different things to different customers and different things to different companies. What one customer may desire as an outcome may not necessarily be what another customer wants, although what I find in general is that there are typically a finite set of outcomes, and we're really just massaging the customer outcome message and how we may quantify achievement of value for that particular customers or that particular cohort of customers. And I realize there's a lot to unpack about customer outcomes. We can go off into a lot of different directions on this. But I've actually experienced situations where the whole concept of customer outcomes has been overcomplicated. And I think it would be great to talk through this because it doesn't have to be that complicated. So let's start with the basics, right? How do you or your organization define customer outcomes?
All right, Andrew, I'm going to jump in here. I think to your point, right? Like I'm big on keeping it simple. We define it simply based on the value that our customers get from the product that aligns with them achieving their goals. And we've actually come up with like 7 core outcomes that almost all of our customers, and I have yet to find somebody to come up with an 8th, but 7 core outcomes that align with most of our customers' needs coming from client success. And being able to manage that, the simplicity of that, right? Value correlation to those outcomes has been really successful in helping us and our customers achieve those.
And I would assume that probably makes those kickoff calls and the introduction of the concept of a success plan and things like that a lot easier for your customers to digest, as well as for you to articulate.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Andrew, I am at a competitive advantage than I think a lot of CS leaders because I'm a CS leader for CS leaders on a CS platform, and I've bought customer success software for the past decade. So I'm very intimately familiar with what I'm trying to achieve with that. So being able to hone in on 7 outcomes that I know, regardless of where you are in your stage, one or all of these is going to be important to you at some point in your journey. Being able to come to the conversations with our customers with those clearly articulated, it takes the guesswork out of it, right? Our customers sometimes really struggle to articulate goals. And I think it's the hardest part about goal management and outcome management is that they know that they need something and they know they have a pain. They're not quite sure how to define it, how to measure it, what the KPIs are. And so being able to give them a clear roadmap and say, here's what this looks like for you. What of this is the most important? Usually the hardest part for us is getting them to pick just 2 or 3.
I think we're going to all want to understand, in your world, what those seven.
Okay. All right. I'll give the seven.
But I want to give Josh and Patrice a chance to weigh in on this question as well.
Oh, we just wanted to hear from Christy today. That's all.
Stop it, Josh.
I think to dovetail off of Christy a little bit, right? I think start with a perspective always, right? Avoid like the blank piece of paper situation, right? I think, and off of your point, Andrew, like don't go in with like the world's your oyster. There's infinite possibilities, right? It's overwhelming. Yep. And I think really thoughtful organizations will do exactly what Christy mentioned, right? Your product should have a set of, core things that like, why did your customer purchase your service, your product, whatever it is, right? We market our products that way, right? We don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Like what does our product do for customers? And starting from that lens, and sometimes like they'll want to modify it a little bit based on what's important to them and where they are in their maturity curve and all of that. But coming with a perspective, I think is probably a number one best practice for sure.
Well, it's that meeting of the minds between what do we think we can offer you and what do you actually want to have done on for your business, right? So when you combine those two things together, then those outcomes are so much easier to manage through as you're engaging with them throughout the years, right? So very much agreed, right? You have to come in with that sense of here's some ideas that we have, but then not make it overly complex where the customer's just panicking because how are we going to accomplish all these things? What are we going to actually do to measure this stuff, right? So it's a very pragmatic approach to how we partner together with our customers.
It very much is a pragmatic approach. And it's something, it's something that we teach, you never show up with a blank success plan, right? That's the worst thing that you can do, and when you ask a customer, what are your desired outcomes? 9 times out of 10, they're just going to look at you like a deer in headlights. The hell does that mean? And so our job is to, kind of steer them down the right path, give them some suggestions. When I've worked with companies like yours, at your maturity level, where you guys are at, this is the type of things that we see as being important. Does any of this resonate? Do any of these things tie into, the nirvana of customer success, tie into those overarching corporate objectives that you're trying to achieve as a company? But Chrissy, back to your core outcomes. Tell us. We're all just
I'm going to give you
dying to hear it.
If somebody can come up with an 8th, I'll give you $1 million. Clearly, I don't have that, so that's not going to happen. But
that is on record. We're recording this.
I know. No pressure. I've asked a lot of leaders, and nobody has come up with an 8th. So here are my 7 that we present back to our customers who are customer success leaders purchasing customer success software. Democratize data, operationalize your processes, drive efficiency, mitigate risk, identify growth, increase visibility, or scale with ease. And so what we do is we present those as like the core business objectives. And then we've got our entire framework that breaks down how our product actually helps them achieve those and what are some KPIs that they can actually measure to correlate back to those.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point. I think that quantification of achievement is super important because that's where isn't that how we are able to tie value to the outcome?
Yeah. The interesting thing that I've seen and at other companies as well is there is the value you're going to get directly from the product that's going to influence your ability to drive some real material value like an ROI or revenue. But for us, it's like making sure that they understand how that correlates to the product, because at the end of the day, if our product's doing its job, that's great, but the customer also has to be accountable for using that data. I will go and type those 7 things into the chat for everybody because the chat's blowing up. I am from New York. I speak fast. I apologize. I'll go slower.
What's funny hearing you say those 7, Christy, is the fact that they're so broad, right? I think a lot of times we get stuck. We trip over our own feet when it comes to figuring out what an objective or an outcome should look like. We want to try and make it so micro-focused when in reality, it's just a bigger statement. And then the mechanism by which you measure it is the more important part.
Yep.
All these outcomes are great, but until you're actually measuring something, then they're just ideas.
Yeah. And there was a question a bit about this, Andrew. I think the quantification there, there's gotta be the why, the what, like sometimes it's money, sometimes it's hours saved, sometimes it's people. So like, and so I think the how you measure it is relative to what the outcome is. But if you can't quantify it, I think you're really going to struggle to show value on the other side as we talk about outcomes and value.
And that's where, the outcomes are different from value. It's almost like value is the maturation of the concept of the outcome. We're going to start here. We're going to put a stake in the ground. Here's your desired outcome, but we don't get to value until we're able to quantify what that really means, and even bigger value if we can tie that to some overarching corporate objective that potentially drove the decision to use your offering.
Right. Absolutely.
So why is it important? Why is it important to define customer outcomes? Why can't we just wing it? Why can't we just say, well, come on, there was a reason why you bought us. There was a reason why you invest in us. People just don't just spend money to spend money, right?
It's the same idea as a mission, vision, value statement for a company, right? If you're not continuing to repeat the reason why, people forget it, people leave. There's all sorts of different changes that happen within the business itself. And if you don't have some sort of guiding light, guiding star, or some sort of framework under which you're engaging with the customer, value becomes ethereal. You don't actually achieve anything.
I also think our customers have a finite amount of time, right, to work with us. And so I think it's really important that we craft our entire engagement with our customers around something that's going to be worthwhile, right? And that there's going to be, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, so to speak, right? And I think when our customers are prioritizing their time and they're meeting, like, why are they meeting with us? Why are they doing all these activities? If we can tie all of the time they're spending with us, they're investing with us, to achieving some overall objective that then has value that we can quantify on the other side, I think that's really the equation, right, that we need to be shooting for. Otherwise, why are we doing all of these things, right? Why are we having these meetings? Why are we filling out these forms? Why are we gathering these metrics? Why are we looking at this data? And then if you're purchasing a product or you're purchasing CS, how do you justify that investment, right? If you're not able to quantify any of that.
Exactly.
And I love that it carries through every aspect of the relationship. It's not just you as a executive that's making a decision about a product. It's everyone working together, and it affects the meetings, it affects the EBRs, it affects the way that we engage in terms of tracking analytics. Everything is affected by defining the right outcomes, and the timing matters for sure.
So are we just defining customer outcomes at the beginning of the relationship, or is it more than that?
Changing all the time. I gotta be honest with you. I have one customer who I've started on a journey with one outcome focus that's been consistent throughout the partnership. It also varies from person to person. I'll tell you, if I talk to an executive stakeholder, they're going to care more about certain things than if I talk to our champion or who are our admin, right? Like CSMs have different focus areas than their bosses. So for us, it's also contextualizing the value outcomes by individuals in the partnership. And honestly, that becomes it adds another layer of complexity, right? But if you're not managing those things, you have a lot of influence that might, render this partnership invaluable or lack value.
Yeah, I think a great point that you made, Christy, is, the audience that we're working with. I think, when we engage with customers, we should try to engage at all levels, right? We want senior stakeholders and executives, but we also want to engage with people closer to the work that can help us to really understand what's meaningful and important. And so I think it's great to be able to identify, objectives or cascading objectives across all of those groups. But if you're going to pick which audience you're going to align to, you've got to align to top level objectives. Like that's going to be the most critical, because that's where I think you're going to get your buy-in, your stakeholders, your ROI, the people signing the checks. So not to say we ignore everybody else, right? But it is so critical to have senior stakeholder outcomes, something that's meaningful to them when you get on a business review, right? Helping them to understand why they should continue to invest, why, spending their time with you is meaningful.
It's that creates stickiness. When you can tie your desired outcome to, hey, as a company, we're trying to borrow money at a lower cost of capital, and we do that by implementing this accounting solution that reduces our DSO, right? That improves our cash flow, right? So we can look at the desired outcome of improving cash flow and improving collections, because that's an efficiency play, and that's something that the accounting department may be interested in. But the CFO looks at it as, hey, we're going to be able to borrow money at a lower rate of interest, which is going to save the company a lot of money. And so we've taken that from a efficiency perspective to a bottom line perspective from the CFO, and that makes you stickier as an offering.
Can I just add another layer to this? I think every customer success professional ideally would like to serve as like a consultative partner to their customer. This is a great time to lean in that way. I've had individuals at a different level than the executive stakeholder who we're definitely engaging on a regular basis. It's our opportunity to lean in also and coach them and advise them that, hey, if your goal is so far away and disconnected from what your organizational goals are, right, we can lean in and provide some coaching. So the way that we've broken down all of our outcomes also is that each of these outcomes have KPIs and different workflows that correlate back to folks at different levels. So if the business is saying democratization of data, great. As an executive, they care about XYZ. As an individual, you care about this. And here's how your workflows and the things that you're doing throughout the partnership in your jobs outside of our technology all converge to support that. And so being able to lean in and provide that guidance has also allowed us to reposition how they view us, right? Move away from that vendor and more to that strategic partner.
Well, we become, sorry, Andrew,
go ahead.
we become the facilitators of the vision statements going down, right? So absolutely agree that we get the high level executive buy-in, but then we have to translate that level after level after level to the people that are doing the different parts of the work, right? Because each of those are going to have different components that we're going to measure to lead up to the broader outcome that you're trying to achieve.
And the help that you provide those people, those boots on the ground in achieving those things, will likely elevate their standing within the organization. And you're definitely playing the ego card, which is always a great card to play, right?
Our job is to help our customers to be successful, right? Like if we can prop them up with the data, all of this, the KPIs, the metrics to read out to their executives, right? Like we don't need to be taking that credit, right? Because that comes back to us, right? We're their partner. And I think, if you think about, some of the personas of the people you work for or work with, there's people that are looking for that opportunity, right? Like they have an audience and they need help. Sometimes we craft them to put together an executive briefing deck or, arm them with very powerful data, right? I think that's where you've really hit the sweet spot with, that strategic advisor with your customers.
And it's not a unique strategy. It's not a strategy that's unique to SaaS either, to cloud software. I was doing this back in the day when I was at Business Objects on-prem software. Wells Fargo, perfect example. We had a bunch of shelfware, and we were able to convince a VP, and everybody's a freaking VP at a bank these days, but we convinced a VP to let us roll out a solution. And I'm not going to go into the gory details, but it was the first real solution that we had deployed for Wells Fargo, who owned every flavor of BI available to them: Cognos, Microsoft reporting services, MicroStrategy, all these things. And then what we did is we armed the people on this VP's team to then demo the solution to other areas of the bank. And so we went from a single implementation to, by the time I had left 5 years later, we had 17 different implementations across the bank. I mean, it was the true land and expand. And it wasn't us taking an account management strategy. It was just what you said, Patrice. It was making these people successful with what they were trying to achieve and then letting them spread the goodness for us.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it becomes a constant conversation. Sorry, Andrew. Like it's not one of those things that like you said it, you forget it, you walk away and you revisit it again in the next QBR. It's the constant conversation of like, hey, this is why we're doing all of this stuff. And then that why becomes the value in of itself.
And so what I think I'm hearing, though, because I got this question, one of the top topics that we wanted to talk about, and I think we've pretty much introduced that, is we want to define customer outcomes both at a tactical level as well as a strategic level. Yeah, would you agree?
Yep.
Yeah. Because I also think it's going to come back down, right? Like when you align to those, corporate or strategic objectives, right? That's ultimately going to cascade down to do the work, right? So we've got to do it, top down and bottom up. But I think what's really important is that they align, right? Because I think at the end of the day, you're going to have to work on, a prioritized set of things. And if you're misaligned with the corporate goals and objectives, like you're going to have to make some decisions on what's important to work on.
Well, and it also creates a requirement for accountability, right? Because someone down below may be challenging an objective, but then it gives you an opportunity to come back and be like, look, this is what your executive team told us. This is what we're doing. Where's the disconnect? Why are we changing this right now? I think a lot of times CS in general has a hard time telling a customer no, because we want to be viewed as that partner. We want to be viewed as the advocate, and the advocacy for whatever reason has this implication that we're always going to be the nice guy. And if you have clear objectives, if you have clear outcomes defined, then you can push back and tell the customer, no, this is not what you guys agreed to. If you want to change it, let's go back and talk about why.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being a trusted advisor doesn't mean we always say yes. You need to be able to say no as much as you need to say yes as well. Right. That's so important. And if you're at a point, though, where you have been unable to tie your desired outcomes to overarching business objectives, what does that mean? Does that mean we just haven't asked enough questions? We haven't asked the right questions? We haven't talked to the right individuals? Because I've
it's
heard
all
that.
of those things, Andrew.
Combination of all. Yeah.
I think it's one of those things. If there is no correlation there, you're missing steps in all of those conversations.
Yep.
Yeah, and if the people that you're asking these questions to are unable to answer them, you're not talking to the right people. And so you need to figure out who to talk
delicately, though. Can I? I'm sure
of course.
Everyone's probably run into this before, right? Where it's like you do try to engage and have that conversation, only for it to fall flat because, again, this person maybe they're not privy. They've not gotten the exposure to some of these higher strategic goals. You have to be careful on how you navigate that too, especially if it is the most senior person in your relationship today. And so being thoughtful about how you navigate that. I agree. We're not talking to the right person. How you manage to do that, though, is probably its own webinar on itself.
Yeah, it is. I mean, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to step on people's toes. We don't want to turn somebody who's an advocate into a detractor because we went around them. We went over their head.
Well, and
that's why I think having proper sponsorship, right, aligned to the account is so critical. And we're using, that audience or that person, however the structure is appropriate for your organization, right, strategically for those reasons, because they have a responsibility to hold their organization accountable for the objectives that they have set, right? Like I think sometimes in customer success, we get ourselves, a little too entrenched in the politics and the solving about we can't. Right? Like you can only go so far and then you have to go back to your stakeholders, right? To get folks realigned, right? And to Chrissy's point, there's a way to go about it without damaging relationships, but the customer's responsible for holding their organization accountable to the objectives they've identified.
Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
No.
Well, I was going to say, I think a key first step in that is ensuring that all of the stakeholders from the top of the organizational structure down to the boots on the ground are all present in that kickoff calls or that set of kickoff calls where you are agreeing on these are the desired outcomes. So we can at least ensure, that's a great measuring stick right there to ensure that everybody's on the bus and everybody's pointed in the right direction. It's from that where you begin to discover misalignment. Yeah. And you have to nip that in the bud right out of the gate.
And I think what helps, because this is a perfect scenario, right? Where we get everyone on the call, everyone's on the kickoff, everyone knows what everyone is doing. The real world a lot of times is not as clean. So I think one of the questions that I've had my team ask, and I've asked myself to folks that we've been talking to is, if this fails, who does that fall on? Who actually is held accountable if one of these objectives doesn't get met? And where does the where does the fault lie? Where does the blame go? Is it on you? If it is, okay, let's start talking about what that means in terms of these outcomes, these measures. If it's on somebody else, and we should probably have them on the call as well and make sure that we're aligning appropriately there. So you're absolutely right. We want to get as many people that are going to be able to make those decisions on those early calls. But at the same time, you also have to be, to Chrissy's point, be careful about how you're bringing in the challenge of you're not the right person we need to talk to.
Yeah. That's why I think too, the whole like early and often kind of helps there. So, we can try to mitigate some of that by making sure that we can keep orienting our entire engagement around those outcomes, right? Because I think sometimes, listen, folks want to do other things or, they get sidetracked, right? And we have to go back, right? And you don't want the only time that these people see these outcomes to be the kickoff and maybe like a quarterly or an annual review, right? Like we need to often bring these back up and say, how does this activity that you want to do align to these outcomes? If it doesn't, we should probably give it a hard look and see if we actually should be doing it or not, right? Yeah. It's your North Star, right? To keep kind of aligning to your priorities and the activities if you should be doing them or not.
I'm a firm believer that objectives and outcomes should be outlined in every document that we send out. So whether it's a QBR, if it's a part of a weekly, monthly check-in, just have them present, right? Just so that we're making sure that we are staying aligned to it. Now, granted, it can be a little bit overbearing if it's just like every week we're going to talk about the same thing. But if it's at least flashed on the screen, it shows up, here's what we're doing, then at that point in time, you have better chance of avoiding and mitigating that risk of someone, forgetting about it or trying to push back on stupid things because they don't see the overall vision.
Well, and that's why on success plans and what we teach in our success plans module is you need to define success and quantify it. And it needs to be on a success plan, which is a single page, and it should be accompanying every update. Here's where we're at. And that alone, though, isn't sufficient enough. We also need to throw that stuff up at the top of the email and net things out for people. Super important. So, by the way, if you have questions, please add them to the Q&A. We've got a bunch of questions. So how about we jump to some questions? And by the way, if you want to upvote any of the questions that you see, I go based off of most upvotes first, followed by most recent. So you see anything in that questions list that you would love to know more about, upvote that. So unless any of my esteemed guests have anything else to add before we get to questions, by the way. It sounds like Christy. It sounds like your dog wanted to.
My dog always has something to say. Yeah. I told you I had a bunch of little people in the house, and now they're all exiting, and so the dog's going crazy. No, what I was just going to say is, Josh and Patrice, you both talked about establishing goals at the onset of the partnership, and I have to tell you, I know that both of you have had experience in very sophisticated and large organizations. What I see so much of the time, though, is that for newer organizations or less mature organizations, it is so common for them to jump right into onboarding. Right? Because there is this intense focus, this maniacal focus on time to value for so many companies. They skip over that opportunity to realign. They make an assumption that what was discussed in the sales process is still the core focus area or the goals coming into the partnership. And I will tell you, 90% of the time when we kick off with a customer, what happened or what was discussed in sales is not what they're looking for as we move forward. And so if you don't have a meeting, some conversation that is taking place before you do anything, once they become a partner, I am telling you right now, I am urging you to please go change your process, introduce a different conversation. We start with our partnership kickoff call. We require the executives to be present in that meeting. We will not have it without them. And we cannot start the partnership onboarding or anything until we have aligned on certain things. Now we're trying to automate some stuff and speed things up, but it is critical that we have that discussion because if we don't know where we're going, we're never going to get there.
Yep. I strongly agree with that. And now being at Site Improve and walking away, from ServiceNow, I'm seeing that challenge for sure, because a lot of times it is very quick. Let's get into onboarding. Let's get implemented. Let's make sure that everyone's getting value right away. But we have to, we've been going through this process of changing up. What what is the information that we capture from sales? How is value defined in the sales process? And are we consistently continuing that as we engage with them on the CS post-sales world, right? Not that there is such a thing as a true post-sales environment, but we have to have the right conversations with the right people so that we're not potentially missing something and missing the mark later on. So good reminder. I like that.
Worst thing you can do is get, we're in the middle of onboarding and somebody go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We got a problem.
All the assumptions are made up front. So let's just avoid that.
And you know what assumptions,
we all know, Andrew. I know you just want to say it, but we all know.
I don't want to say it.
Your logo says it all.
Yeah. What are you talking about? It's a donkey with a plunger on its head. All right, let's get to some questions here. Our first question comes from Christine. Christine, thank you for your question. Thanks for joining us today. How can we help our accounts measure the before so we can measure the after? At times, it's difficult for them to measure. They want faster and easier, but numbers are powerful. Looks like Patrice wanted to jump in on this first. Patrice, what have you got to say to Christine?
It's a tough one, right? But it's critical, because how can you measure where your success if you don't know where you came from, right? It's really important that the process is pretty linear, right? This is where I want to get to. This is where I am right now, right? And then we do these things, these activities, and you're tying them up to the objective, right? And then we remeasure to see the progress, right? So, as far as making recommendations, I think it's relatively unique based on your service, your products, your company, kind of all those types of things. And in some places it's easier than others. But I think truly, in order to measure the value on the other side, you have to go through that, linear process of a baseline, right? This is where I want to get to. Here's where I am from a baseline perspective. We're going to do all of these activities to get you to closer to where you want to go. And then we're going to redraw that again and measure, that improvement. It's a critical activity.
Now, the thing that's kind of interesting is a lot of times, and I remember this from ServiceNow, I'm seeing it here at Site Improve, customers don't know what to measure, right? Or they have no understanding of what the measurement should look like. So the way that I like talking about it is it's a science experiment, right? If you've done any science classes in your education, you know that you start off with a hypothesis, right? What do we think might happen if we change something? What is the potential route that we might go if something does change over time? The easiest temptation is to say, all right, I'm going to take all the recommendations you give me as things that I want to measure, and let's do all of them. But the best way that I've seen this done is you pick two. You pick one sometimes. Maybe it's as simple as just picking one damn thing that you're going to change, and that's going to be the thing that you actually measure before and after. And you agree to what those terms are. You agree to what the metrics are going to look like. You agree to how the analytics process is going to be. What you don't track down, what you don't document is not going to be measured. So you have to start with something. And I think to Christine's question, right? Like, it feels like customers don't know what they don't know. We have to inform them. We have to show them what it could look like, right? We come with some ideas, but it's really up to your business. This is the way that other companies have done it. This is the way that we've seen it happen at other places. Here's what we recommend for you. Go and find what that baseline looks like.
If you're going to position outcomes, you've got to have a perspective on how you can measure the other side of it, right? So, we talked in the beginning about coming to the table with a perspective, right? Christy has her 7, right? At ServiceNow, we're very kind of product centric, right? Like based on what customers want to achieve and implementing ServiceNow, right? We build the product, we market the product. Like we should know what customers, should be able to achieve, right? With investing in our product. You should have, right, an equation there that aligns to those outcomes to help the customer to understand what type of data, they're looking to pull. As far as analyzing it and making it meaningful, right? That's a partnership.
And that's an interesting topic too, though. Sorry, Andrew, 1 second. So that's an interesting topic too, because that is not a CS exclusive activity,
right?
This is a CS plus product, CS plus sales, CS plus marketing, and understanding what is it that we think our product can potentially do, and how do we actually define it consistently across every engagement that we have with all of our customers. That's on us. right? As CS leaders, we need to go back to our partners within product, within marketing, within the executive team. And like, what is it that we're hoping our customers do with our product?
Yeah.
And then once you can define that, then you can come in. So there is a precursor to all of this before we get to the customer.
Well, there's a precursor to this. I mean, what we're talking about here is how can we help our accounts measure the before? There's a reason why, and I look back at sales on this. There's a reason why the customer is spending their money with you.
Yep.
Right. So maybe we're not, I don't think that we are giving enough credit or enough focus on the customer and the sales process. Right. I didn't just come here to spend money. I came to you because I have a problem. Okay, let's talk about that problem. Right. That right there should be, if we press hard enough, is going to define the before. Right.
Yep.
We should be able to pull that. We should be able to extract that.
Andrew, can I play devil's advocate a little bit?
You can always play devil's advocate, Christy.
It's my favorite thing to do is to wear little horns. So I love that, and I wish that was the reality. Can I tell you how many customer success professionals buy customer success software because they think that's what they have to do? They assume it's their strategy. Yeah. How many of I have leaders that come in and I'm like, well, what does your strategy look like? Well, what have you put down on paper? And it's like, I'm buying the software. This is my strategy. Like this, I assume that you're going to.
It's a silver bullet, right?
And it's crazy. And so we have a lot of folks who come in, and I know that it's not customer success agnostic. I am sure that every single industry has its thing that they assume they have to do when it comes to technology, and they buy it because they've always bought it, or they buy it because their peers are buying it, whatever. And so we've got customers that come on and don't really have, they have not clearly either experienced or defined or articulated their pain coming in to have a framework of what that baseline looks like.
Now, is that their fault, or is that your sales team's fault for not qualifying that customer?
Listen, I believe every customer is a qualified customer. How long it takes us to get to value, what we do with them, how we get there, resources behind it. I say that there is nobody who can't be successful in my product. There are nuances to that. Yeah. So I don't prevent my sales team from selling. Right. I just need to know who bought so we can support them and meet them where they are.
Yeah, fair. But I do think you've got to have a really solid process post-sale to try to get as much information out of your sales team before they disappear on you, right? And that requires that consultative, and I think, we could come up with, 5 or so standard questions that every CSM should ask their sales team to help set them up for success, because there's nothing more irritating as a customer getting through a very painful sales process, getting the investment, going through that whole process. You just want to onboard, and then your CSM shows up and asks you, what do you want to do? Right? Why are you here? What are your objectives? Right? So kind of again, full circle, coming in with a perspective, you've got to, pull that information from the pursuit team.
100%. 100%. That is, when we were doing consulting, it became one of the highest, that was the one process that we found in more cases that led to customer disengagement was when customer success showed up. The people who were responsible for making all the promise into reality and said, well, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. Right? What do we do? What are we here for? We're like, really? Are you serious? But by the way, Christine, thank you for the question. I want to divert to what Christy said, because this next question from Keely, I think is relevant. And Patrice, if you could do me a favor and hit that done button for me on Christine's question. Keely asks, when discussing those ongoing outcomes, what is the best practice if it comes to light that it seems this customer isn't a great fit for what you have to offer?
Oof. Yeah, well, we've had that happen. And I think it's about having honest conversations. I mean, listen, there's a few ways that this is going to play out. One, we're going to back this customer out, and maybe it's a customer that isn't or shouldn't be a customer, and let's establish early on. Guess what? Sales doesn't get the sale for that. We let the customer out of the contract if it's early on. But if there's like real specific things that say, heck, no matter what we do here, this just is not going to work. There's that, right? That's obviously worst case scenario. Other situations that we've played out where there is possibility of working together and making it work, right? So there's either no chance or there's some chance. And if I'm working with a customer where there is some chance, like I said, our focus and our framework is really now being redefined around meeting our customers where they are. I think there's too many programs that are one size fits most approach. And I think that that's what fails more often than not, is we assume that all customers can meet this certain criteria to advance through these predefined programs that are all internally defined and addressed. And honestly, that's just not how your customers are expecting this experience to go, because they don't all have the same things. They're all checking the same boxes. So for us, if they are not a great fit, they're maybe possibly an okay fit. It's just really understanding where they are, what those gaps are, and then working with them to redefine. We've just defined programs here that are super flexible. And as we're thinking about this, we've got some new cool programs. We're doing a success probability score that allows us to score customers before they're customers to find out where they rank. And then we design a process and a program that meets them where they are. That's helped really start to drive a different outcome and experience for everybody.
Basically, what we're talking about is CS qualified sales. Right. We have CS qualified leads that we pass over to sales, and we need that same level of partnership in response. The thing that's kind of interesting is that this is a process that involves an intentionality around how we actually sell our customers. Do we have an ideal customer profile? Do we have an understanding of what our ideal customers do when they actually get onto our platform? Do we have a good idea? And those things don't exist in a vacuum for CS. We just happen to use those tools to be able to qualify how we're going to engage with the customers once they become customers. But this is where I'll push back on us as CS. We can't solve all these problems, but we have to work within our internal teams to actually get that level of visibility of what do we define as the ideal customer profile, and how do we make sure that when a sale comes in that doesn't fit that, what are the corresponding mechanisms that we need to take? And to your point, Christy, right? Sometimes it's drastic, like, hey, this is not going to be a good fit for you guys. Let you out of the contract. That is one of the options there. But ideally, you want to try to mitigate that as much as possible by creating circumstances and frameworks inside before a customer even becomes a prospect.
When I was at Adobe, we had a process depending on certain elements that made up a implementation, an engagement, what have you, the size of it, that it would trigger basically a deal review before and that deal review would involve sales, the post-sales team, as well as the PMO. And we would go through and, okay, here's all the stuff that needs to get done. Here's our risk factors, yada, yada, yada. And while we may decide to go ahead and move forward with it, there may be a reason why we are going to take what likely will be not a great fit customer. There may be good reasons, right? Just because they're not a good fit customer doesn't necessarily mean that we don't want the business. Maybe they're not a good fit customer, but one of the things we want to do is we want to make this type of customer a good fit customer. So we're going to use it as an opportunity to learn and expand and grow our footprint and expand our offering. So just because you have a bad fit customer, it shouldn't mean, hey, no, we're not going to do business with you.
Right.
Yep.
The key, though, is having that conversation.
Yep.
Right. And let's go in eyes wide open. Let's be prepared. Awesome. Keely, thanks for the question. Thanks for joining us. Hannah, thank you for the question. Hannah, this is a question for Christy. Hannah asks, how do you manage understanding a customer's outcome when you're working at scale? I'm working with 15, well, it could be any of you, by the way, but she just said question for Christy. I'm working with 1,500 customers with a team of 5. So it's a challenge to understand their outcomes in detail.
So this is where we use technology to support our initiatives. I'm telling you, I worked with somebody else who had the exact same question and asked me how I was doing goal management with customers at a certain scale. I'll tell you, like, we can get super tactical here. We were doing things like, it was like pre-kickoff surveys that would establish, let them fill things in, those data points getting populated back into their customer success tool, that information then triggering a series of campaigns and things that either the team was doing manually. I do believe that every customer should have some human interaction. Doesn't mean that you have to have a high engagement model, but that capturing it that way through some automation allows you to scale it. If you have these things predefined, like I said, for us, it's our 7. From those 7, there's certain KPIs. So our survey would look like, hey, pick your top 3 of those. What are those KPIs? Great. Be able to push that all back into your tools and systems, and then use that information to trigger all of the different things that happen as a result of that. Hopefully your team is curating a lot of great content. You've got marketing, hopefully, your CS team, sales, whatever. You should have enough information being curated that helps support all the different workflows for your customers to achieve that. If you don't, I would say get to work.
We actually have a new product offering that we've had a number of teams take advantage of. It's called a discovery question workshop. And we have teams, we have organizations that show up to this and have everything from high touch teams that join us, enterprise teams that join us, to their scale teams. And for the enterprise teams, it's all about, coming up with that set of desired outcomes, and then the questions that they're going to ask, the open-ended questions that they're going to ask their customers to understand more what the customer is trying to achieve and how we're going to achieve it. And on the scale side of at the scale side of the framework, it's the same concept. Here's a finite set of desired outcomes. We're going to cover 80-90% of the desired outcomes that all of these scale customers are going to be looking for. And then it's, as you pointed out, Christy, it's a set of surveys to say, okay, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and we're basically going to be able to generate a customized success plan for you that says, here are all the things that you're going to need to do to achieve what you're trying to achieve. And it's so you scale requires you to be more prescriptive is what it is really what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Josh, Patrice, even though Hannah wanted to hear from Christy, she's already heard from now me as well. So anything else to add to that?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think, it's a bit of a no-brainer, but the higher touch, you're going to be able to be a lot more personalized, hands-on. But again, this kind of gets back to your organization needs to have a methodology as far as what success looks like, right? Even though, I loved your point there, Christy, like meeting the customer where they are. It's not a one size fits all, but there has to be a framework. And if you have that framework of core kind of objectives that make sense for your customer base, you can leverage that as a starting point for customer success at scale. Data analytics, tooling, critical. You won't be able to scale without it, but it will never be white glove, right? I think it's really important to know, what you can achieve at scale versus, your white glove approach, but still very critical. And a lot of organizations deploy both, right? So they can reach all their customers.
Patrice, did you say, I'd love to just get your opinion on this because I've had some debates with other folks. Even if you have a white glove model, would you assume that they would still benefit from some of these scale practices?
Yes. I think we have to be careful about automated campaigns for top tier customers. I think we will struggle in CSAT if customers feel like they're getting general, messaging, right? But I think as far as like best practices and methodology and sure,
product
absolutely
releases
helps us to be more efficient, right? And provide thought leadership that's consistent. But I don't think we can send like generic, campaigns out to top tier customers. Absolutely not.
Yeah, 100%. I think you need to look for opportunities to scale white glove, but to Patrice's point, we can't be too generic. But if we can free up just a bit more time,
yes,
for those white glove individuals, that time can be well used to spend with your customers, helping them to achieve even greater, helping to achieve even greater value with your solution.
I don't even think it's necessarily about augmentation, right? I wouldn't say like scale back and do less of what you're doing from a white glove approach, right? I would think of it more of like an enhanced experience, right? Maybe there's people that you don't have access to today because of the way that your organization is structured. If you've got one person, for example, I used to manage GE, huge company. It was really challenging for me. And it was like basically just me on this account with a team of people, but to be able to introduce new strategies that we could use technology to support to enhance the conversations and to, again, distribute more information around best practices and what's possible. And that was just a layer in addition to what they were already getting from the team that we had supporting it. I think it could enhance it, right? So I don't know that I'd propose scaling back that human engagement, but really just finding ways to enhance it thoughtfully, right? I wouldn't push generic things. Your marketing team's probably already doing that, but really find ways to push useful information based on where your customer is and how they're partnering with you today.
I think that's what you mentioned, Patrice, best practices and
and
thought leadership.
I think the only thing I'd add to this conversation is just the fact that scaled customer success, however we view it, however it's done, it needs to be intentional. It can't be I'll use a cleaner term, I guess. It can't be the redheaded stepchild of all the things that you're doing for regular customer success. Sorry,
really? You're taking
that was
redheaded daughters.
Yes,
that's you. You got to clean things up.
That was the cleaner version. Sorry.
Wow.
But it can't be something that's secondary, and it's not a second-class citizen to the rest of the customer success stuff that you have, right? So it needs to be intentional, needs to be planned out, it needs to be valued by the organization, your organization, right? If you're going to get into customer success and you're doing it at scale, you have to have the buy-in from your executive leadership that this is something that's going to be prioritized, and you're going to get people and teams. Can't diminish the value or the effort that scaled CSMs actually take to work with that many customers. Otherwise, it minimizes so much of the engagement model. So that's my only plug there.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Hannah, thank you for the question. All right. We've technically answered only 3. We still have 13 left. Just a reminder, folks, we're getting near the top of the hour here. We will stick around until quarter past and answer as many questions as we can. So if you can stick around, please stick around with us. Otherwise, if you got to go, check out the recording and the transcript early next week on our website. Our next question comes from Caitlin. Caitlin, thanks for joining us. Caitlin asks, if a customer is happy with current objectives, but they can't tie to an activity that will actually improve and achieve an outcome, how can we reroute them? Achieve an outcome. How can we reroute them?
So I think this is kind of going back to, if they want to do something, an activity that we can't tie to an objective, I think I'd love maybe confirmation from Caitlin if that's kind of what.
Caitlin, you're still here. You want to drop in it? You want to explain this a little more in the chat for us? Yes, that's exactly what she meant.
Yeah. I think this is where we need to get really strong with our value narrative and be able to explain to customers why it's critical that we tie to the objectives. Also critical that we're crafting our entire engagement, right? That early and often, right? To Josh's point, every piece of collateral, everything has you pick 3 objectives, right? And it's in everything you do with them, the plan, the success plan, everything. It's not to say we don't do anything that doesn't tie to a strategic objective. I think that would be a little too black and white. But I think when it comes down to, I think we all have had a list of 12 things a customer wants to try to prioritize, right? When you're going through that exercise, I think you go through the why, right? And if it doesn't tie to an objective, maybe we carve that off for when we have some more bandwidth, right? If it's a valuable activity, I don't think it always has to. I
think I'll also add that this goes back to the conversation about objectives at different levels, right? Strategic objectives are going to be broader by nature. And there are going to be things that get done below that level that may not necessarily directly contribute to the strategic ones, but are valuable to the people that are doing it themselves. If we're trying to create champions, if we're trying to create success out of the people that we're working with, sometimes those activities may not necessarily directly affect overall objectives, but they're still valuable because they're valuable to that partner, to that person that you're working with. So I would say that it's okay to have secondary objectives as long as they're not potentially going to limit or prohibit the achievement of the bigger ones.
Yeah. Building a little capital with your stakeholders.
Awesome. Thanks, Caitlin. And thank you for clarifying for us. Next question comes from Andrea. Andrea asks, if outcomes are always changing, how are tracking and measuring successes you achieved before moving to the next? And what about those outcomes that never really go away? I mean, this is what your success plan is for, right? As we move through the customer journey, the success plan is constantly evolving. And that's how we're tracking and measuring that success as we move along the journey.
I think the only clarifying point that I would make here is that tracking and measuring requires a unified shared language of what measurements actually look like and how we're going to track those. So if you're not getting things that go away, like outcomes that are not going away, could be a translation problem. could be a definition problem, could be a metrics defining problem, right? And that is something that we do need to hold ourselves responsible to, of getting that clarity from the customer around this is what we think you mean. Tell us what you really mean, and make sure that we're speaking the same language on this.
It might be time to go back and reevaluate if that objective, right, is still viable. And that's also too where I think it's important to have a solid stakeholder group, right? This is where you can leverage your business reviews, right? These were the things we oriented around. Do these still make sense? And reclassifying them, or to Josh's point, like massaging them a little bit with some different language so that's meaningful to everybody.
Viable and relevant. Make sure they're viable and relevant.
I guess I have a question around that. Maybe I'm just interpreting the question a little wrong, because I would say that the objectives that we've set here at Client Success, right, they're always going to be relevant, right? We're always getting closer. If I think about driving efficiency, I can get a little bit more efficient year one. I can get more efficient year two, right? Like some of these things, they won't go away. We will have different KPIs that we're measuring to get closer to that, right? So the objectives stay the same. The goals might evolve. And so I just want to make sure, maybe I was just reading or that and interpreting it wrong, but like my customers' objectives, again, those 7, those are always going to be the things that they're solving with our solution. But there's different goals specifically that they're going to continue to move as we hit those goals, hopefully.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure I was understanding.
And you don't need my validation by any means, Christy, but I think that
I always need your validation, Josh.
No, there's different. She doesn't need, she just doesn't care. That's really.
That's the more accurate
friend. He's an Instagram friend. He's like he's a friend of mine outside of this, Andrew.
We've achieved a different level of relationship here.
Wow.
To be fair, Andrew's my Instagram friend too.
Hello. Okay. We're going there. We're taking a different tack here. All right. That's fine.
What I'll say though, the outcomes, the objectives, the bigger things, you're right. They don't change necessarily, but absolutely the measures and KPIs and metrics that we use. I think I love what you said. The KPIs themselves may change because we may need to refine how we're measuring things, or we may need to refine what we're pointed at. But I absolutely agree that the objectives themselves should stay the same, because that's where you get continual value year over year, contract over contract. It's not just the
sometimes,
interim.
right?
It depends on what the objective is. If it's like
it depends on the objective.
Thing where it's like,
that's true. You're right.
Thing.
Yeah.
I think
sometimes you can only squeeze so much juice out of the orange. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So at that point, like we've reached it. Great, check it off. We did this, we celebrate, we're going to close that one out, and then we're going to replace it with something else. Some are going to be continuous for sure.
Well, I think that there's, you have all these outcomes. Like you said, Christy, you could have all 7 of those outcomes. And I think at various times in the customer journey, some outcomes are going to become more important than others. They're going to fluctuate as you go through that. So you're right. The outcomes may not ever go away. Their importance at a given point in time is going to vary.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We're in violent agreement.
Thank you for your question.
It doesn't have to be violent, Josh.
This next question is from Jonathan. Jonathan, thanks for making time for us, and thanks for the question. What types of questions do you ask when you were trying to figure out their goals or outcomes? Have you found that it's hard for people to verbalize those or understand clearly what they need or want? This is one of those situations where open-ended questions become incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And also why we have, like I mentioned, we have teams coming to us to help with these discovery question inventory, so we can come up with a standard set, right? When we have this type of desired outcome, here's a set of questions that you can, use to begin that type of conversation, right? So I think at the end of the day, a lot of this boils down to being prepared.
Yeah. And I think this is where a methodology, right, really comes in play. I think organizations need to set their customer success teams up to be successful by having some structure here around how to engage in these conversations. If you can't come to the table with some very prescriptive, a list of 7 outcomes, for an example, right, at least have a method in which you're going to do a discovery, right, with your customer. But I think, part of why our customers, invest, with us is because we're the experts in whatever, we support, right? And so we should have some thought leadership based on our customer base, based on their peer group, based on this. So those are things that, we should be tapping into if you're not already, right? What are other customers in this space doing? Whether it's by industry, by what they consume, however you think about your customers, customers love that. They love when I say, another retailer of your size, right? This is something that they did that really helped them to be successful. That's where I think, you being a partner and providing thought leadership is really what get customers excited.
I can't nod my head enough to that. And I have nothing to add. That was beautifully stated. Yeah. I will say that's the one thing that we do is listen, you're always going to have some moment where maybe there's that blank stare from your customers. Having our objectives defined helps. I will still say we have some head scratchy moments where people are unsure of what they should prioritize or why they're really here and what are the things they should look at. Giving them a baseline of saying, hey, other customers like you, this is what they're prioritizing. How does that sound? And try to guide them a little bit, but giving them that baseline of what their industry is working on or working towards is helpful.
And that all goes back to prep. You need to prepare for these things.
For sure.
Right? You need to prepare for these things, whether it's a discovery question inventory, understanding what others in their industry are doing or what have you. You can't show up and wing these conversations.
Haphazard success is not a real success.
No, exactly. It's like whack-a-mole. Right. Jonathan, thanks for your question. We still got a few more minutes. We're going to keep going. KC asks, how are outcomes different from objectives? I can see them being the same or very similar. Note, I'm in a product marketing helping our implementation team. Okay, so we got a noob here. I think a lot really boils down to how you define them internally. Yeah. I mean, they can be objectives, they can be outcomes, they can be just come up to your point, Josh, come up with a standard vernacular, right? Come up with standard language.
Yeah. And then communicate that effectively with the customer so that you're not creating opportunities where conflict will arise because of misunderstandings or miscommunications. So I love the 7 that Chrissy, you mentioned. In fact, I copied them and pasted them into my own Slack so I could revisit those later. I know.
Josh, and give you all of my goodies.
I'm here to learn and absorb from the greatness that is Christy.
Oh my God. You're right. Your
my head doesn't fit in this office any longer. I have to go in the hallway and deflate it.
Wow. Your relationship has taken a dark turn. Okay.
I mean, most of my relationships take a dark turn.
But suffice it to say that having that common language and being able to define to the customers, this is what we think, right? And here's how we measure it. Here's how we define it. Here's what that means in terms of KPIs and measures and in analytics. And here's where in the platform you're going to see this success well-defined and documented. I think just that language, language is such an important part anyways, but how do we share that language with our customers? It's not just about the product they purchased. It's about the vernacular that we speak together and how we communicate effectively around it.
And to Patrice's point, you follow that up with, and by the way, here's our methodology that we're going to use to get you this.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, Josh and I have talked about a lot about this working together over the years. Companies can fall into a very dangerous trap with using a nomenclature that is very, inside out.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's not going to always resonate with customers. And so you have to be really careful, right? I think you can have a methodology and sometimes it's going to be very specific, right, to your organization. And, part of the prep is how can I take this and massage it in a way that's really going to speak to this customer, right? If they're a retailer, if they're a manufacturer, if, customers are going to speak very different. And so, you'll waste a lot of time trying to translate that and misunderstanding each other and losing credibility with the customer if you don't really try to neutralize, the vernacular that you're using.
It's the same thing I always say. You've heard me say it, Patrice, right? It's not our job to force people to drink. It's our job to make them thirsty. So if we are creating the circumstances under which people can come alongside us in our methodology, in our processes, in our tools, then that's so much better.
So why am every time I'm around Christy, I feel like I'm forced to drink?
Stay thirsty, my friends.
That kind of drink. that kind of drink, different show. And
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah, I was like, it's not
awesome.
even 5 p.m. over here.
Awesome. Thank you for that question. Who was that? That was Casey. Thanks, Casey. I think we got time for one more question here. Ed, thanks for joining us. Ed asks, do you find in the era of the great resignation that customers are looking for an outcome of recruiting and retaining top talent as headcount, economy, and remote work factor into that equation?
I mean, sure. I mean,
is that your number 8, Christy?
I mean, for what we do, training and coaching, we definitely, we hear about the retaining top talent, but we've been hearing about that for years. That's not just something talent wants to feel like their company's investing in them.
In the chat, Ed is, I think, referring to the $1 million that you might owe him, Christy.
Oh.
If this is your number 8.
And I got to tell you, I'm not good for it, friends. Sorry.
Ed's teeing up his great resignation.
Client success hasn't hit just yet. Give me a couple of years. We'll see how we cash out.
That's a very viable outcome, right? If that's a focus area and that's a space within a customer's business that you would engage on, that's a great example, right, of an outcome that you would focus on, right? You would then want to do a measurement, right? And something like, attrition, and then you would put together some programs to keep employees happy and excited and engaged. And then you would, remeasure again and kind of see what retention looks like, right? That would be a great example of that linear process playing out in an objective like that.
And I think it depends on the product that you're working with, right? Not every product is going to be able to contribute to that as an outcome. So what are the outcomes that actually are validated by your product that can actually do something, right? Because it's great to have these great objectives and outcomes, but if your product doesn't do it, you're shooting yourself in the foot and you're not creating a good experience for the customer at that point.
It's going to be a place that you play in for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. A place that we play in for sure. Yeah. It's interesting. It's an example in our discovery question module. One of the things that we throw out as an example of a generic desired outcome is employee satisfaction.
Yeah.
So there definitely could be something to say about that. All right, Ed, thanks again. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the question. We are at the end of our time today. We still got more questions, but I've got to let my team go, and I have to go to a parent teacher conference myself for my daughter. So
I got those coming up this week too. Yeah. Good luck.
Are yours? So ours are. So she's in 8th grade. So it is a student-led conference.
Oh, I've been to those. Yeah.
She has developed a presentation, and she is going to be presenting to her mother and I about how she's doing in school.
Seriously,
I awesome. Love that.
I had that from both my boys. They actually had this in elementary school, which is great. But then that turned into, be wary of it. That turned into my older son when he became a preteen, presenting why he wanted a gym membership and all the value.
Listen,
behind it at home.
It's
PowerPoint.
A great skill to develop.
I was going to say, those are great skills that people take a whole career to develop. So
I've gotten 3 decks from her since we moved here. The first
she gave you a pre-read.
The first one on justifying why we were why we should get a dog. We got a dog. Uh-huh. The second one on justifying why she should have a TV in her room. She has a TV in her room. She's really good. She's convincing.
Wow,
that's great.
I wonder where she gets it from.
We're impressed. We're impressed. So
the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, my friend.
Not at all. Not at all. Very proud. Very proud. It's hard for me to contain it when I'm trying to maintain a neutral. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, she's rocking this. This is awesome. I've done something right. All right. So we're at the end of our time for today. I think it was a great conversation. Of course, it was a great conversation. Look at my guest. It's freaking awesome. This is exactly what, this is why I was so excited when we were talking on Monday that I knew this was going to be a great conversation, but it's not what I think. It's what all of you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn, tagging either myself, our guests, or Success Coaching. Once again, thank you all for joining us. This was a great conversation. We definitely appreciate the time, your ideas, your thoughts, your insights, your best practices that you share. One final note, great CSMs know that they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created this CSM Mastermind series to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help everyone. We hope to see you again at our final event for 2022 on December 14th, when we'll talk about becoming the trusted advisor. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day. Have a great rest of your day, week, and month, everybody.